The bright orange envelope appeared on my door at 6:15 in the morning, and I knew immediately it was going to ruin my week. I pulled it off the handle and tore it open right there on my front steps in Centennial, Colorado, watching my breath fog in the February cold. Inside was a violation notice from the Briar Ridge HOA, typed on official letterhead, informing me that my snow melt mat constituted an unapproved modification to the exterior of my property and that I had 72 hours to remove it or face fines starting at $50 per day. I had moved to this new-build suburb 6 months earlier for my job as an insurance claims adjuster, thinking the identical lawns and fresh construction would mean a clean slate after my divorce. The HOA had seemed reasonable during the closing, just the usual rules about paint colors and lawn maintenance. But the constant construction noise from the unfinished sections had been grinding on everyone's nerves, and now this. The snow melt mat was a simple rubber thing I had plugged into my exterior outlet, nothing permanent, just a way to keep the steps clear so I would not break my neck getting to my car in the morning. My car was essential for my commute, 40 minutes each way to the office in Denver, and the HOA was now threatening to tow it if I did not comply with their demands. I took a photo of the notice with my phone, a habit from work, and looked up to see a woman in a black puffer coat and red knit beanie standing at the end of my driveway, watching me with her arms crossed. She walked up the driveway without invitation, her boots crunching on the packed snow, and stopped 3 feet from me. Her name was Deborah Roberts, though everyone in the neighborhood called her Susan behind her back because she fit the stereotype so perfectly. She was the fines and enforcement coordinator for the HOA, a volunteer position she had held since the first houses were built, and she took visible pride in her collections record. She held up her clipboard and tapped it with one gloved finger. "You got the notice," she said. "Good, that makes this easier." I looked at the envelope in my hand and then back at her. "This is a snow melt mat," I said. "It is not a modification. It is plugged in. I can unplug it in 5 seconds. She shook her head slowly, like I was a child who had just said something embarrassing. "The covenants are clear," she said. "Any exterior addition requires Architectural Review Committee approval. You did not submit an application. You did not wait for approval. You installed it anyway. This is a community, not the Wild West." I felt the cold seeping through my parka and wanted to go inside, but I stayed put. "It is a safety device," I said. "The steps were icing over every morning." She smiled, thin and tight. "Then you should have applied for approval first," she said. "Now you are in violation, and the clock is running. 72 hours. She turned and walked back down the driveway, and I stood there holding the orange envelope, the snow melt mat still humming quietly under my boots. I went inside and made coffee, my hands shaking a little from the cold and the anger. The thing about working in insurance claims is that you learn to document everything. Because people lie and memories fade, and the only thing that holds up in court is a paper trail. I opened my laptop and started a new folder labeled Briar Ridge HOA Violation, and I saved a scan of the notice, the photo of the mat, and a screenshot of the covenant section Susan had cited. The covenant language was vague, talking about exterior modifications and architectural harmony, but it did not specifically mention snow melt mats or temporary safety devices. I pulled up the email address for the management company that handled the HOA, a firm called Ridgeline Property Management, and I drafted a polite email explaining that the mat was a temporary safety measure and asking for clarification on whether it truly required formal approval. I hit send and checked the time. It was 7:30, and I needed to leave for work in 20 minutes. The sun was still low, and I needed daylight photos of the setup before Susan decided to change the scene or claim I had damaged something. I grabbed my phone and went back outside, taking wide shots of the front steps, close-ups of the mat, the plug, the outlet, and the surrounding area. I made sure the timestamps were visible and backed everything up to cloud storage before I even got in the car. The drive to Denver was tense. I kept replaying the conversation with Susan, the way she had smiled when she mentioned the clock running, like she was enjoying it. I had dealt with plenty of difficult people in my job, claimants who exaggerated injuries or contractors who inflated estimates, but there was something personal in the way Susan had stood there on my driveway, clipboard in hand, delivering her little speech. I got to the office and dove into my caseload, but I checked my email every hour, waiting for a response from Ridgeline Property Management. Nothing came. By the time I left work at 5:30, The sun was already setting, the winter light fading fast over the mountains, and I drove home with a knot in my stomach. When I pulled into my driveway, there was another bright orange envelope on my door. I parked and walked up the steps, the snow melt mat still humming under my boots, and I pulled the envelope off the handle. Inside was a second notice, this one informing me that I had been logged in the HOA complaint system for damaging common property and that I was required to pay $250 immediately for repairs. I read it twice, standing there in the near dark, my breath fogging. There was no description of what I had supposedly damaged, no photos, no witness statements, nothing. Just a demand for payment. I went inside and called the management company directly, bypassing email. A woman answered, her voice professionally cheerful, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. I installed a snow melt mat on my steps for safety, I said. I got a violation notice this morning. Now I have a second notice claiming I damaged common property, but there is no description of the damage. Can you tell me what this is about? There was a pause, the sound of typing. Let me pull up your account, she said. Another pause. Okay, I see the notices. The first one is standard procedure for unapproved modifications. The second one was submitted by the enforcement coordinator, Miss Roberts. She indicated that the electrical cord from your mat caused a tripping hazard on the sidewalk and that the HOA had to place safety cones and caution tape, which is considered an emergency response expense. I looked out my front window at the sidewalk, which was empty except for snow. There are no cones, I said. There is no tape. The cord does not cross the sidewalk. It runs along the house foundation to the outlet. The woman on the phone hesitated. I can only report what was submitted, she said. If you believe the claim is inaccurate, you can dispute it in writing and request a hearing with the board. How long does that take? I asked. She sighed. Usually 4 to 6 weeks, she said. In the meantime, the fines continue to accrue. I thanked her and hung up, my jaw tight. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop, pulling up the photos I had taken that morning. The cord was clearly visible running along the foundation, nowhere near the sidewalk, and there was no evidence of cones or tape in any of the shots. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a setup. I opened a new document and started typing a formal dispute letter, citing the photos, the timestamps, and the lack of any visible damage. I attached the photos and sent the email to both the management company and the HOA board, copying myself for the record. Then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, trying to think 3 steps ahead. Susan was escalating fast, faster than I had expected, and the management company was clearly taking her word as gospel without any independent verification. I needed more than photos. I needed a witness, someone who could confirm that the sidewalk had been clear, that there had been no cones or tape, that this whole thing was fabricated. I thought about my neighbors, the ones I had met in passing during the move-in, but most of them kept to themselves, heads down, avoiding eye contact. The HOA had a reputation for aggressive enforcement, and no one wanted to be the next target. But there was one person who might help. A guy named Martin, 2 houses down, who had complained to me once about getting fined for leaving his trash cans out 10 minutes past the pickup window. He had seemed as fed up as I was. I walked down the street just after dark and knocked on Martin's door. He answered, looking wary, and I explained the situation quickly, keeping my voice low. I am not asking you to confront anyone, I said. I just need to know if you saw anything on my sidewalk this morning. Cones, tape, anything like that. He shook his head. I walked past your place around 6:45 on my way to my car, he said. There was nothing there. Just snow. I felt a surge of relief. Would you be willing to say that in writing? I asked. Just a short statement with the date and time. He looked past me at the street, his expression conflicted. If I do that, Susan will come after me next, he said. You know how she is. I nodded. I know, I said, but if she is making up damage claims, she is not going to stop with me. He was quiet for a moment, then he sighed. Let me think about it, he said. I will let you know tomorrow. I thanked him and walked back to my house, the cold biting through my parka. It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. The next morning, another bright orange envelope was on my door. I did not even open it right away. I took a photo of it still hanging on the handle, then brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table while I made coffee. When I finally opened it, I was almost impressed by the audacity. The notice informed me that my snow melt mat was now considered a fire hazard due to improper outdoor electrical use, and that the HOA had contacted a licensed electrician to inspect the outlet at my expense. The inspection fee was listed as $350, payable immediately. I read it twice, then I called the management company again. The same woman answered, and I could hear the weariness in her voice when I gave my name. "What is it this time?" she asked. I told her about the third notice, the fire hazard claim, the electrician fee. She sighed. "Ms. Roberts submitted that this morning," she said. She indicated that the mat was drawing excessive power and that the outlet was sparking. I looked at the outlet through my front window, which was functioning perfectly and had been installed by the builder less than a year ago. "There is no sparking," I said. "The outlet is fine. The mat draws standard household power. This is harassment." She did not respond right away. "Sir, I understand you are frustrated," she said finally. "But I am just the messenger. If you want to challenge these claims, you need to go through the formal dispute process." "I am doing that," I said. "I sent a dispute letter yesterday. Did you receive it?" "Yes," she said. "It has been forwarded to the board. You should hear back within 4 to 6 weeks." I hung up and stared at the pile of orange envelopes on my table, 3 in less than 48 hours. This was not normal HOA enforcement. This was targeted. I opened my laptop and searched for Deborah Roberts and Briar Ridge HOA, looking for any public records or news stories. What I found was a LinkedIn profile listing her as a volunteer coordinator, a Facebook page full of complaints about neighborhood rule breakers, and a few mentions on a local real estate forum where people warned newcomers about the aggressive enforcement culture. One comment stood out. Someone had written, "Susan loves to brag about her collections record. She treats fines like a game. Whoever brings in the most money wins." I screenshotted the comment and added it to my folder. Then I started digging deeper. I pulled up the HOA financial disclosures, which were required to be public in Colorado, and I found something interesting. The enforcement fines collected over the past 2 years had increased by 40%, with most of the jump happening in the last 6 months. The management company contract had also been renegotiated during that time, with a new clause that gave them a percentage of collected fines as a performance bonus. I sat back in my chair, the pieces clicking together. Susan was incentivized to rack up fines, and the management company was incentivized to back her up without asking questions. It was a perfect little racket. I needed to talk to someone who understood how this system worked from the inside. I spent the rest of the morning calling around, leaving messages with attorneys who specialized in HOA law, but most of them were booked solid or wanted retainers I could not afford. Finally, I got a call back from a paralegal who had worked for Ridgeline Property Management until 6 months ago. Her name was Angela, and she agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. We met at a place near my office, a quiet corner table away from the lunch crowd, and I explained everything that had happened. She listened, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "I am not surprised," she said. Deborah Roberts was a nightmare to work with. She would submit violation reports with no evidence, and the company would just rubber stamp them because it was easier than pushing back. "Did you ever see her coordinate directly with the management company?" I asked. "Like, did she have more access than a normal board member?" Angela smiled, bitter. "She had her own login to the case management system," she said. "She could submit violations, assign fees, even flag accounts for collections without going through the board first. That is supposed to require 2 signatures, but Ridgeline gave her unilateral access because she brought in so much money." I felt my pulse quicken. "Do you have any proof of that?" I asked. She hesitated. "I kept some emails," she said. "I was worried about liability, about being blamed if something went sideways. I can send them to you, but you did not get them from me." I promised her I would keep her name out of it, and she nodded. "One more thing," she said. "If you are going to fight this, do it fast. Susan has a habit of escalating until people give up or move out. She does not lose." Angela sent me the emails that evening, a whole chain of messages between her, Susan, and the Ridgeline management team. The emails showed Susan submitting violation reports that were identical in language but applied to different homeowners, like she was using a template. There were also messages where Susan explicitly told the management company to deny appeals and to move accounts to collections immediately, even when homeowners had submitted evidence of compliance. The most damning email was one where Susan wrote, "I need these fines processed fast. We have a quota to hit this quarter." I read through the chain 3 times, my hands shaking. This was it. This was proof that Susan was not just enforcing the rules, she was manufacturing violations to hit financial targets. I forwarded the emails to my personal account, backed them up in 3 places, and then I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the screen, trying to decide what to do next. I could go public immediately, send the emails to every homeowner in the neighborhood and blow the whole thing open. But if I did that now, Susan would know I had the proof, and she would find a way to bury it or discredit me before I could use it effectively. I needed the right moment, the right audience, because the reveal needed witnesses. The next morning, I woke up to find my contractor's truck parked in my driveway. I had not called him. I went outside in my parka and navy knit cap, and he rolled down his window looking apologetic. "Hey man," he said, "I got a call from the HOA management company. They told me I am banned from working in this neighborhood if I do any jobs for you." I stared at him. "Banned," I said. He nodded. "They said you are in violation and that any contractor who works for you will lose their vendor approval for the whole subdivision. I have 3 other jobs lined up here this month. I cannot afford to lose them." I understood, but it still stung. "So you are not going to finish the deck railing repair?" I asked. He shook his head. "I am sorry," he said. "I will refund your deposit." He backed out of the driveway and left, and I stood there watching him go, the cold wind cutting through my coat. Susan was not just fining me now. She was isolating me, cutting off my access to services, making sure I could not fix anything or fight back. It was a calculated move, and it was working. I went inside and checked my email. There was a message from Martin, my neighbor, with the subject line, "I will do it." The message was short. I talked to my wife. "We are tired of this. I will write the statement." Attached was a signed and dated letter confirming that he had walked past my house on the morning in question, and that there had been no cones, no tape, no evidence of any damage or hazard. He included his phone number and said he would testify at a hearing if needed. I saved the letter immediately and replied with a thank you message. It was not much, but it was something. I now had a witness statement contradicting Susan's damage claim, and I had the email chain showing coordination between Susan and the management company. I just needed to figure out how to deploy it all without getting crushed in the process. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, 2 weeks out. I marked it on my calendar and started preparing my presentation. I would have 5 minutes to speak during the homeowner comment period, and I needed to make every second count. I drafted a script, rehearsed it out loud, and organized my evidence into a single folder with printouts and digital backups. I also sent a formal request to add my dispute to the meeting agenda, citing the Colorado HOA statute that required boards to hear owner complaints. The management company acknowledged the request but did not confirm whether I would be added to the agenda. Typical. In the meantime, the bright orange envelopes kept coming. 1 every other day, each with a new claim. Unapproved holiday decorations, even though I had taken them down weeks ago. Excessive noise, even though I lived alone and worked long hours. Improper trash can placement, even though my cans were in the same spot as everyone else's. Each notice came with a fine, $50 here, $75 there, and each one went into my folder as evidence of the pattern. By the time Thursday arrived, I had documented 15 separate violation notices in 2 weeks, totaling over $1,000 in fines. I also had the email chain from Angela, the witness statement from Martin, my time-stamped photos, and a written summary of the selective enforcement pattern. I loaded everything onto a thumb drive and put printouts in a folder, just in case the projector did not work. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a bland room with folding chairs and a fold-out table for the board. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the back row, watching the other homeowners trickle in. Most of them looked tired, resigned, the kind of people who had learned not to make waves. Susan was already there, sitting at the front table with the other board members, her clipboard in front of her. She saw me and smiled, thin and tight, and I felt my jaw clench. The meeting started with routine business, budget approvals, and landscaping contracts, and I waited through 40 minutes of procedural talk before the homeowner comment period opened. The board president, a man in his 60s who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, asked if anyone had comments. I stood up, my folder in hand, and walked to the front. I heard Susan shift in her chair, and I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on the board president. "My name is on the agenda," I said. I submitted a dispute regarding multiple violation notices I believe were issued in error. The president glanced at Susan, who shook her head slightly. "We did not receive a formal agenda request," Susan said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. I pulled out a printed copy of my email confirmation and handed it to the president. "I sent it 2 weeks ago," I said. "Here is the receipt." He looked at the paper, then at Susan, and there was a flicker of annoyance on his face. "We will hear him," he said. "You have 5 minutes." I connected my thumb drive to the laptop and pulled up the first slide, a timeline of the violation notices. I walked the board through each one, showing the photos, the timestamps, the witness statement from Martin, and the lack of any actual damage. I kept my voice steady, professional, the same tone I used when presenting claim findings to adjusters. Then I got to the email chain. I pulled up Angela's messages and projected them on the screen. "These emails," I said, "show that Miss Roberts has been coordinating directly with the management company to issue violations without board approval and to deny appeals without review. The emails also show that there is a financial incentive structure in place that rewards high fine collections." I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching the other board members lean forward to read the screen. Susan stood up, her face flushed. "Those emails are taken out of context," she said. "And they are private communications. You have no right to present them here." I turned to face her, and I kept my voice calm. "These emails show a pattern of misconduct," I said. "They show that you have been fabricating violations to meet collection targets. That is fraud." She opened her mouth to respond, but the board president held up his hand. "We need to recess and discuss this," he said. "Everyone stay seated." The board members huddled at the front table, whispering urgently, and Susan stood off to the side with her arms crossed, glaring at me. I could see other homeowners pulling out their phones, taking photos of the screen, whispering to each other. The energy in the room had shifted. People were paying attention now. After 5 minutes, the board president called the meeting back to order. "We are going to table this matter pending an independent investigation," he said. "In the meantime, all outstanding fines against your account are suspended." Susan turned to him, her voice rising. "You cannot do that," she said. "The fines were issued according to procedure." The president looked at her, his expression hard. "The procedure is under review," he said. "Sit down, Deborah." She sat, but her face was bright red, and I could see her hands shaking. I collected my folder and walked back to my seat, my heart pounding. It was not a full win, but it was a crack in the armor. As I sat down, Martin caught my eye from 2 rows ahead and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. The meeting ended 20 minutes later, and as people filed out, several homeowners stopped to thank me or to ask for copies of the evidence. I handed out my email address and promised to send everything I had. Susan left without speaking to anyone. Her clipboard clutched to her chest, and I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. I knew this was not over. She had been humiliated in front of the whole neighborhood, and people like Susan did not take that lightly. I walked out to my car, the cold air biting at my face, and I checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail. I played the message, and a man's voice came through, clipped and professional. "This is Derek Moss from the Ridgeline legal team," he said. "We need to discuss your recent allegations against Miss Roberts and the management company. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." I saved the voicemail and got in my car, my mind racing. The management company had lawyers now. This was escalating fast. I called Derek Moss back the next morning from my office, putting him on speaker so I could take notes. He was polite but firm, the kind of lawyer who had done this 1,000 times. "Mr. Moss, I appreciate the call," I said. "But I am not sure what there is to discuss." I presented evidence of misconduct at a public HOA meeting. "That is my right as a homeowner." He sighed, a sound that said he had heard this speech before. "The emails you presented were obtained without authorization," he said. That raises serious legal and ethical concerns. Additionally, your public accusations have caused reputational harm to Miss Roberts and to Ridgeline Property Management. We are prepared to pursue defamation claims if you continue this course of action. I felt my jaw tighten. The emails show fraud, I said. They show that Miss Roberts was issuing violations to hit financial targets. That is illegal. There was a pause. Mr. Moss, he said, his tone shifting slightly, I am going to give you some off-the-record advice. Drop this. Accept the suspension of fines and move on. If you push this further, you are going to find yourself in a very expensive legal fight that you will not win. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. What if I do not drop it? I asked. Then we will file a restraining order against you, he said. We will bar you from attending HOA meetings, and we will pursue collection of the outstanding fines plus legal fees. You will lose your home. I thanked him for the call and hung up, my hands shaking. I sat there for a long time, thinking about Angela's warning. Susan does not lose. But I also thought about the other homeowners at the meeting, the ones who had come up to me afterward, the ones who had been living under the same fear and frustration. If I backed down now, nothing would change. Susan would keep collecting her fines, the management company would keep taking their cut, and the next person who spoke up would be crushed just like I was being crushed now. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email chain again, reading through it carefully. There was one message I had not focused on before, buried in the middle of the thread. It was from the Ridgeline legal team, sent 6 months ago, warning Susan that her enforcement tactics were creating liability for the company and advising her to get board approval before issuing any more violation notices. The email was clear, professional, and direct, and Susan had ignored it. She had kept issuing violations on her own authority, racking up fines, and the management company had let her do it because the money was too good. That email was my trump card. It showed that Ridgeline knew Susan was operating outside the rules and had done nothing to stop her. It created massive liability for them, and it gave me leverage. I spent the next 2 days preparing a comprehensive email to send to every homeowner in the Briar Ridge subdivision. I included the full timeline of my case, the violation notices, the photos, Martin's witness statement, and most importantly, the full email chain showing Susan's coordination with the management company and Ridgeline's own legal warning that she had ignored. I wrote a cover letter explaining that this was not just about my snowmelt mat, it was about a systemic pattern of abuse that had been targeting multiple homeowners for financial gain. I listed the total fines collected over the past 2 years, the percentage increase, and the management company's contract clause that gave them a cut of the collections. I ended with a call to action. If you have been fined unfairly, if you have been threatened or intimidated, now is the time to speak up. The next board meeting is in 2 weeks. Bring your evidence and demand accountability. I scheduled the email to send at 6 p.m. on the day before the meeting, so Susan would not have time to spin a counter-narrative before people showed up. Then I waited. The intervening days were tense. I kept expecting another bright orange envelope, another legal threat. But nothing came. It was like the calm before a storm, and I could not shake the feeling that Susan was planning something big. Then, 3 days before the meeting, my phone rang. It was Martin. You need to get down to the Gatehouse, he said. Now. Susan is there with security, and she is trying to get your car towed. I grabbed my coat and ran out the door, my heart pounding. The Gatehouse was at the main entrance to the subdivision, a small booth where a security guard checked visitors and monitored the access gate. By the time I got there, a tow truck was already parked on the shoulder, its yellow lights flashing, and Susan was standing next to the guard booth talking to the driver. I pulled up behind the tow truck and got out, my breath fogging in the cold. Susan turned and saw me, and her expression shifted from surprise to fury. "What is going on?" I said, keeping my voice level. Susan pointed at my car, which was parked legally in my own driveway a quarter-mile away. "Your vehicle registration is expired," she said. "That is a violation of community safety standards. The HOA has the authority to remove unregistered vehicles from the property." I stared at her. "My registration is not expired," I said. "I just renewed it last month." "Show me," she said, crossing her arms. I pulled out my phone and opened the digital registration in my state app, holding it up so she could see the date. It was valid through the end of the year. The tow truck driver looked at the screen, then at Susan, and shrugged. "Looks current to me," he said. Susan's face went red. "The vehicle has been reported as abandoned," she said. "The work order was submitted by the management company. I am just following protocol." The driver pulled out his clipboard and showed it to me. There was a work order signed by Susan authorizing the tow. But the reason listed was expired registration, and my car was clearly not expired. "This is harassment," I said, looking at Susan. "You are making things up because I called you out at the meeting." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "This is a community, not the Wild West," she said. "You do not get to break the rules and then play victim when there are consequences. Say whatever you want, I have it all in writing." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice steady. "You are right," I said. "You do have it all in writing. And so do I." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, which had been running since I got out of the car. "I am recording this conversation," I said. "And I am going to file a complaint with the county sheriff for attempted vehicle theft." The tow truck driver looked at Susan, then at me, and he shook his head. "I am not touching this," he said. "This is between you and the HOA." He got back in his truck and drove off, leaving Susan standing there with her clipboard, her face twisted in rage. I turned and started walking back to my car, and she called after me. "You are going to regret this," she said. I stopped and looked back at her. "I already sent the emails," I said. "Every homeowner in the subdivision is going to see what you have been doing. The meeting is in 2 days. I will see you there." I got in my car and drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel. The email went out at 6 p.m. the next day, and within an hour my inbox was flooded with responses. Some were thank you messages from homeowners who had been fined for minor infractions and had been too afraid to fight back. Others were offers to testify at the meeting, sharing their own stories of harassment and selective enforcement. A few were angry, accusing me of stirring up trouble and making the neighborhood look bad. But the overwhelming majority were supportive, and by the time I went to bed that night, over 30 homeowners had confirmed they would attend the meeting and speak up. The next morning, I woke up to another bright orange envelope on my door. I almost laughed. I pulled it off the handle and opened it, and inside was a notice informing me that I was banned from the upcoming board meeting due to disruptive behavior, and that security had been instructed to remove me if I attempted to enter. I took a photo of the notice and forwarded it to the entire homeowner email list with a single sentence. "This is what retaliation looks like." The meeting was packed, every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. I arrived early and stood outside, waiting to see if security would actually try to stop me. The guard at the door looked uncomfortable, checking his phone and glancing at the crowd. When I walked up, he held up his hand. "I have instructions not to let you in," he said. I smiled. "Check with the board president," I said. "I am a homeowner. I have a right to be here." The guard hesitated, then stepped inside and spoke to someone. A moment later, the board president came to the door, looking exhausted. "Let him in," he said. The guard stepped aside, and I walked into the packed room. Susan was already seated at the front table, her face tight with barely controlled anger, and when she saw me, she stood up. "He is banned," she said, pointing at me. I issued a notice. The board president held up his hand. "Sit down, Deborah," he said. "We are not doing this. The meeting is public. Everyone sits." The meeting started, and the homeowner comment period was extended to accommodate the crowd. One by one, people stood up and told their stories. A woman who had been fined $500 for leaving her recycling bin out past 7 a.m. A man who had been threatened with a lien because his mailbox post was the wrong shade of white. A couple who had been charged $2,000 for an unapproved fence that matched every other fence in the subdivision. Each story was the same. Susan had issued the violation, the management company had backed her up, and the homeowner had been forced to pay or face escalating consequences. By the time the 10th person finished speaking, the board members were visibly shaken, and Susan was sitting with her arms crossed, her jaw clenched. Then Martin stood up and told his story about the trash can fine, and he ended by holding up his phone. "I have a doorbell camera," he said, "and I have been saving every interaction I have had with Miss Roberts. Would you like to see them?" The room went silent. Martin connected his phone to the projector, and the video played. It showed Susan standing on his driveway, clipboard in hand, threatening him with daily fines if he did not pay immediately. The audio was clear, her voice sharp and aggressive, and at one point she said, "I do not care if you think it is unfair. This is a community, not the Wild West." The room erupted in murmurs, and several people pulled out their own phones, nodding. Susan stood up, her face bright red. "This is a witch hunt," she said. "You are all ganging up on me because you do not like being held accountable." I stood up, my folder in hand. "No," I said. "We are holding you accountable. And I have proof." I walked to the front and connected my thumb drive to the laptop. I pulled up the email chain, focusing on the legal warning from Ridgeline that Susan had ignored. "This email," I said, "shows that the management company knew Miss Roberts was operating outside her authority and that they warned her to stop. She ignored the warning and continued issuing violations. That makes both her and the management company liable for fraud." The board president looked at Susan, then at the screen, and he stood up. "This meeting is adjourned," he said. "We need to consult with legal counsel." The room erupted in protests, people shouting questions and demanding answers, but the board members filed out quickly, leaving Susan standing alone at the front table. She looked around at the crowd, her face pale now, and then she grabbed her clipboard and walked out the side door. No one followed her. I packed up my materials and left, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. It was not over yet, but the momentum had shifted. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from Ridgeline Property Management. It informed me that all outstanding fines against my account had been refunded in full and that the management company was conducting an internal review of enforcement procedures. It also stated that Deborah Roberts had been removed from her role as fines and enforcement coordinator pending the outcome of the investigation. I read the letter 3 times, then I forwarded it to every homeowner on the email list with a short note. This is what happens when we stand up together. Over the next week, I received similar reports from other homeowners. Fines were being refunded, liens were being released, and the management company had hired an independent auditor to review the past 2 years of enforcement actions. The HOA board announced at an emergency meeting that they were terminating their contract with Ridgeline and that they would be bringing enforcement in-house with full board oversight. Susan did not attend the meeting. I ran into Martin at the mailboxes a few days later, both of us bundled up against the cold, and he grinned at me. "You did it," he said. "We did it," I corrected. He nodded. "Still," he said. "You started it. You had the guts to stand up when the rest of us were too scared." I shrugged. "I just documented everything," I said. "That is what I do for a living." He laughed. "Well, keep doing it," he said, "because this place needs more people like you." I thanked him and walked back to my house, the snow crunching under my boots. The bright orange envelopes had stopped coming, and my driveway was quiet except for the hum of the snow melt mat, still plugged in and doing its job. I looked at it for a moment, this simple rubber thing that had sparked a 2-month battle, and I felt a strange sense of pride. It had been worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been bullied into silence. I went inside and made coffee, my hands steady for the first time in weeks, and I sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the neighborhood. The construction noise was still there, the same constant rumble, but it did not bother me anymore. This was home, and I had fought for it.